Megan here. I'm actually just going to show you hopefully a better demonstration on how to do acrylic pouring. I've already mixed my paints, but just to show you here, you can do a couple of different things. You need acrylic paint, such as this one here. This is the Liquitex Basics acrylic paint. I mix that with floetrol, and sometimes I put a little bit of water, but I mix them in these squeeze bottles. If you can't find floetrol right now, or don't want to go grab a ton of different paints, you can also buy this Artist Loft Ready Mix pouring paint. This will have a slightly different finish on the canvas when it dries. But today I'm just going to do a 10 by 10 canvas with a couple different colors that I've pre-mixed of my acrylic paint. So with this, I'm going to do it's called a tree ring pour. So what I'm going to do is actually layer different kinds of paint, or different colors of paint, into a cup here. So we'll start with some white, and then we'll go with this metallic blue. I'm slowly putting all of my paint in the cup. You'll see that the paints have different weights, so they don't mix until you actually go in to mix them. Then we'll do this bright purple. Now this is actually, if you don't have the acrylic paint in this form, the kind of tube paint, you can also use craft paint. Let me show you that. Which is going to be something like this here from Deco Art. You can also do, I've used some other brands of paint as well, but I find that the Liquitex type of paint, or even an off-brand like that, works best. So that was gold. Now we're going to go in with some purple. Some dark purple. And then we'll do a little bit more of that blue. And we'll go back in with some white. For a 10 by 10 canvas, you don't need a ton of paint once it's pre-mixed. We'll also go back in with some gold. So really with a cup this size, you only need about half of a cup. And let's do a little bit more of that light purple, and that should be good. So then sometimes what I like to do is put a little pillow of white down on my canvas. That's going to help the paint flow. So you can tilt and spread your paint across the canvas. So now we're just going to slowly pour our paint. I'm just making little circles. All right. And then what I'm going to do is stick this cup underneath in my plastic bin here, because that extra paint will come out of the canvas, and then you get these skins that you can use for jewelry. You can do tons of different things with them. And the next one I'm going to do, because I don't know this is quite enough paint on the canvas, I'm going to just pour a little bit extra around the edges to help it kind of flow. We'll kind of go in, just cover our canvas a little bit more with that. Make sure we get some of those edges. At least get it all started. We're going to let this sit a second on the canvas, the paint that's in the center here. Get all of the sides covered with some white. Okay, so I think we're ready to start tilting our canvas. So we'll spread all of this paint out. We're going to tilt very slowly in one direction. And then we're going to tilt it back the other way to get it back into center. So I decided to speed up this part of the video for you guys. Sometimes stretching and tilting the canvas can take quite a while. It does take a lot of patience to sit here and get the paint to move in the right direction. So what I'm doing is I'm just slowly tilting the canvas to move the paint all around and cover as much of the canvas as I can. Now, I tend to leave a lot of white negative space around the edges in these types of paintings because that's what I like. That's just my style. You guys don't have to do that. You can use a bit more of the paint in your original cup when you do the tree ring, and you'll be able to cover a lot more of the edges and not have so much negative space. You can see that some of my paint is flowing a little bit faster than others, and that's because I just didn't have quite enough paint on the canvas to get everything covered. So I'm slowly tilting it, and eventually you'll see that it gets to the corners and I kind of get it to the position that I like. But again, you can use a little bit more paint and then you won't have to do quite so much stretching. I do also like to make sure that I have the nice rings in my canvas that don't run off the edge quite as much, and so that's why I use a little bit more white around the edges and have that negative space in the canvas as well. So again, just tilting and letting it go off the edges just a little bit, but not too much. Kind of flip the canvas around so you guys can see how I'm stretching this here. And if you add water to your paint, sometimes it'll actually flow a lot faster, which you'll end up seeing when you add too much water to your paint, you'll end up breaking the binder in the paint. So they actually won't stick to the canvas as much. So you do have to be careful with how much water you add to your paint versus just the paint itself and floetrol. If you're just starting out, I definitely recommend utilizing some of the premixed pouring paints that you can find at Michael's or at Walmart or Joann's. Wherever you can get craft supplies, you can usually find some sort of ready mix pouring paint. So here what I'm doing is just adding some extra paint to my corners and along the edges of my painting. Sometimes when you don't use enough paint, you end up not having all of your edges of the canvas covered. And for me, I really like to make sure that there is paint covering all of the edges of the canvas. So I'm actually just taking my white paint and I'm filling in some of those spots that you might see on the sides where the blue didn't cover, or even some of the white did not hit the canvas and it was looking like it was still dry. So I'm just making sure that we cover all of the canvas, and then that will allow the paint to flow a little bit more over the sides, and you'll see it continue to move just a little bit as the paint starts to settle and dry. So I'm just touching up those edges here. You can even see I take my finger just to kind of cover those spots to make sure that every side has the paint completely covering the canvas. And with these canvases, these corners are really tough. These are some pretty heavily wrapped canvases. So those corners actually have a kind of a rough edge that you do need to make sure it gets covered with paint, and a pretty thick layer at that as well. A quick note here about floetrol. Floetrol is self-leveling, so where you see in those white corners where I've got kind of a bumpy surface on the paint, that will level out. All right, there we go. So that is the tree ring pour, and that's how I do it. I mean, you can do it different ways. You don't have to have that pillow of white down at the beginning, but I think it helps to make sure that I've got enough paint to cover the canvas and then I'm not going in a ton with extra paint at the end. We're gonna let this sit here for a while. It'll actually still move a little bit. You'll start to see these little cells pop up, these little like spots. It's not gonna change too much. I don't use any silicone in the paint like other artists might, but or I didn't on this one at least. So it's not going to change too much, but it will kind of drip a little bit more and change a little bit. So there you go. I'll zoom in a little bit for you guys so you can see it. So there you can see some of those tree rings. I love this little corner right here where you get the white meeting up with those different colors. And same with this one too. I think that that looks really pretty. And there's that corner. Again, we'll zoom out a little bit too. All right, there you have it. That is an acrylic tree ring pour. And again, I mix my paints with, it's acrylic paint and floetrol, which you can usually find at a hardware store like Menards or Lowe's, Home Depot in the paint section. You get a big jug of it, and then I just mix it up either in little cups or I can mix it up in these bottles that I have. Again, you don't have to use floetrol. You can actually use the ready mixed paints. I've seen other people that will just mix their paint with water and it comes out looking great as well. So definitely give it a try. But yeah, that is our acrylic tree ring pour for the day. All right, see you later, guys.